Greetings and salutations, board game fans. The Dice Pirates are back with episode 23 of the podcast. We are here this week to talk about the Eric Lang trilogy of games, Bloodrage, Rising Sun, and the newest release, Ankh. We're going to go into these games, talk about what we think some of our favorites are, and how they compare to each other. I'm your captain, of course, Ian, joined by the ever-present Matt and Aaron. How are you guys doing?
Ahoy, ahoy.
We're doing good, man. I'm excited to talk about some Eric Lang trilogy. That's all I got. That's all I got. I realize that normally I bring the funny, but I'm just genuinely excited to talk about these three good games.
Well, these are games that we all really enjoy, some more than others for sure, and I'm sure we're going to have a very fun discussion when we get to that. Of course, as always, we're going to jump right into the soapboxes to start with, and Matt, we're going to jump in with a soapbox that you have for us. What do you got?
Yeah, man. So if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that one of our, I guess probably our, by a significant margin, most popular episode was our breakdown of what the heck happened to Fantasy Flight Games, kind of the arc and trajectory of that company from putting out a lot of beloved classics to getting bought by Asmodee and having kind of a shift in priorities, division shutdown, layoffs, a lot of changes, and people have and longtime fans have sort of wondered, do they still got it? Does the Fantasy Flight Games magic ever going to come back again? And probably their most high-profile release in some time, maybe the most high-profile release since their acquisition by Asmodee, has just dropped in the last few weeks. And that is Descent, Legends of the Dark, the giant box full of minis, enough to choke a horse, a dungeon crawl game driven by an app, largely kind of a hybrid of a video game and a board game experience. And when it was first announced, with its significant art style departure from the earlier Descent games, with its wackadoodle price tag of nearly $200 for the base game, and its mandatory apps, a lot of fans freaked out. And we did our own speculating on the show about how this game would actually, would this game be any good? Or would this be another sign of Fantasy Flight Games kind of trying to find itself? And while none of us have played it, I'm pleased to say and really excited to say that early reviews of this game are really pretty darn good. The game's sitting on the hotness list right now on Board Game Geek. It's sitting at a 7.7 average rating, which is very solid by Board Game Geek standards. And a lot of the early impressions of the game are that it is a really compelling blend of the experience of playing a video game and playing a board game. I'm actually really excited. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it because, again, I haven't played it, but I just thought it was worth talking about because this is a really significant new release. Really expensive. It's a very bold move to put something like this out into the marketplace, and it's interesting that people seem to be really excited about it. One of the things that I do find interesting is a lot of people seem to be really bowled over by the interaction between the app and the game, in a way that makes me feel like almost nobody played the original Descent Road to Legend app that was put out at the end of the life cycle of Descent 2nd Edition. This actually is not Fantasy Flight's first blush at creating this app-driven interface for one of their games. They did it, way back with the XCOM board game years ago. They did a more fully realized integration of an app into Descent 2nd Edition late in that game's lifespan, and then Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition was a fully app-driven experience. So there's a lot of people reacting like this is just brand new, and I think that's really interesting. I think it just goes to show that some of these earlier attempts maybe flew under the radar. Particularly, I don't think a lot of people played Descent with its app-driven integration at the end of its life cycle, and it makes more sense to me why they've relaunched this with a new skin and a new look and a fresh rebrand, because it just obviously they didn't sell a lot of new boxes of Descent based on that app. But impressions are really positive. I'm actually really excited to play it. The thing that it still looms over my mind is, am I actually going to spend $200 to have this experience? What do you guys think? I mean, to me, the game looks fun. I like everything about the idea of it, but that price tag still just freaks me out.
I think the price tag is definitely like the hardest part to get around. But especially if you're the kind of group or just the kind of person who really loves to dive into one game, I feel like this could easily be something you could go in with friends or just really commit to this in the same way that you're going to approach Gloomhaven or Frosthaven. If you have a group that's willing to sit down and really commit to it, then it can absolutely be worth the money. I think what's really interesting, especially with the app-driven way that this game is working, because I mean, essentially, it's in many ways a video game that you play out on the tabletop where you have your characters, you can move up to a tree, and then you can tell the app, you say, all right, I checked this tree for loot, and the app might be like, oh, you found an apple and a torch in the tree, you know,
Yeah.
and then it'll add that to your inventory, so you can have like tactile things you're doing on the table, but then everything else is reflected in the app itself. And what I think is interesting about this is it allows the developers to do more interesting things with story and reveals than they may otherwise be able to, but also, and this was something I noticed in some of the app driven games that we've played, is that it makes it feel far more cooperative. Dice Pirate Max tends to be the one who looks through and will bring things out, but then often it feels like he's kind of leading us through things, and he's not as much, on the same. He's, of course, he's cooperating with us, but in many ways, it feels like we're all playing a game and he's facilitating the game in many ways. And so it feels really nice to have everybody be on the same level of knowledge and to actually get surprised. I think that's the best part of it.
So I haven't played this particular game, but a game that my wife and I have been just tearing through is called Destinies. It's a very similar, it's in the same vein. You've got a box full of miniatures, a whole slew of tiles and locations, and it's run almost entirely through the app. You could almost conceivably get away with just the app. I mean, it handles so much of the game, but by doing that, it allows a much kind of what you were saying. It allows a much greater level of storytelling and interaction because you don't have to have a 50-page rulebook with can you use the torch against the wolf in this scenario. It is really, really great at the storytelling of it all because you don't have to have these giant binders full of story pages because it's all in the app. And the publisher of the game, Lucky Duck Games, later this year they're going to release a piece of software that you can put on your computer where you can take all of the cards and items and characters that are in the base game and the expansions and make up your own scenarios and stories. So you can download entirely new campaigns, and they're able to do that because everything's handled in the app. If you want to introduce some crazy new mechanic or whatever, it's all handled by the software there. So I don't. I a little bit get where people are coming from, why they hate apps and board games. I think they're very much overreacting.
Absolutely. And there's still plenty of games coming out that are classic board games that don't have this component to them. So, there's something for everybody for sure. We're going to go ahead and move on from the soapboxes, and we're going to jump into the game for this week. We're going to play the good, the bad, and the neutral. We're going to bring this one back. I'm going to go ahead and throw out a character, and you guys have to decide where on the D&D alignment chart you think this person would fall. Are they good? Are they evil? Are they chaotic? Are they neutral? What do you guys think? Your first character is actually Neo from The Matrix in, response to the newest trailer dropping for the new Matrix movie. I'd love to know what you guys think Neo would be from the original.
That's fascinating. I haven't seen the Matrix movies since I walked out of the theater of Matrix Revolutions in 2000 and whenever, and I said, that was some hot garbage, and I'm mad about it. And I'm still mad about it. I'm not even excited about this John Wick-looking Matrix that they just put out. I don't know. Aaron, kick us off. What do you think?
I mean,
he's good, right? He's definitely good, but is he lawful or chaotic? That's the real.
I would say chaotic good, but like towards neutral good. Like he sometimes breaks the rules to do what he needs to do. But then, I mean, that kind of leads to a larger conversation of when he's doing things within the Matrix, since that isn't really real, is he doing anything, if as long as he isn't permanently disabling another human being, like, since that world doesn't really exist, he's not really doing anything wrong.
But if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life. So
Yeah,
he is killing people.
But if he breaks them out of the, I don't know.
I don't know. I think I got a hot take on this. I think that he is chaotic good in the first movie, the only good one. I think he and the whole crew are like definitively agents of like chaos, right? Because they are rooted. The story is like rooted in the perspective of the Matrix, and so they're breaking down the system. They're breaking down the Matrix. So they're definitely forces of chaotic good within the context of that. I think over the course of the movie, he becomes increasingly more boring as a character, and he becomes extremely lawful good. He becomes more paladin-like. He becomes more powerful. Yeah. He becomes more rooted in this like very vanilla, like Superman-like moral code. And as a consequence, he becomes more boring, and the movies become more boring. Lawful good is not always boring, but it is often boring because people don't know how to write lawful good characters in an interesting way, and they did not know how to make him interesting. The more godlike and straight-laced he becomes by the end of the series, he's incredibly boring. So there's my hot take on. I didn't even know I had a hot take on Neo on the Matrix, and I did.
I love it. We are not only finding out about Neo, but we're also finding about Matt's long-held regrets about the Matrix franchise.
Look, I'm a child of the 2000s. I was in college wearing Jinko jeans and listening to. I'm not even going to talk about the music I was listening to. But, Matrix 1 was like the coolest thing. And like, if you weren't even a cool person if you didn't have the Matrix on DVD. And then the second movie, you're like, okay, it's still cool. Like the freeway thing was cool. I don't know what was going on with that French man and like what's happening here. And then the third movie, I was just like, what's even happening right now? Like what happened to this? I'm still bitter about it.
It's a lot. I'm going to ask you guys, where does Loki from the Marvel Cinematic Universe fit on the D&D alignment chart? Now, of course, we've had a couple different versions of this character. You can go for the, canonical timeline, or you can do the new Loki show. I feel like they're two very different characters, kind of up to you on which one you want to throw out.
First off, the Loki show is all within MCU canon. If we're sticking to MCU Loki.
Sure, okay, yeah, but it's a different timeline. They're different characters.
Yeah, but
point.
it's the same character. I'm hard disagree.
Let's have a fight right at the beginning. Go.
Zoom fist fight. Let's go.
Finish him.
MCU Loki, chaotic good 100% of the way. No, I'm sorry. Let me restate that because I got my alignments mixed up.
I got my alignments mixed up.
He's actually no. You know what? I'm gonna say chaotic good. I'm gonna stick with that because Loki, in his heart of hearts, at least up until the events that happen in the Loki show, Loki deep in his heart believes that the world is better if he's in charge, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to put himself in charge. If you look at character studies of, for instance, Doctor Doom is another parallel to this character where he believes, and it's actually shown in the comics, that he does end up running a country and everything's better for it. He is willing to murder however many people he has to murder, take over the minds of whoever he has to put himself in a position of power to be in charge because he thinks that that's what's best for everyone. Is he absolutely misguided in this belief because he's actually just a really lazy, selfish guy? 100%. He's completely wrong. But good villain always thinks that what they're doing is right. That's what makes them interesting. And I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to say Loki, chaotic good, final answer.
I disagree fundamentally with everything you just said. I think, so here's my take on it. This is really hilarious that you brought this up. Behind the scenes into the life of the Dice Pirates, we didn't plan almost anything in this episode, and we didn't even decide that we were playing this game until like right at the start. So this wasn't planned, but I just watched the first Avengers movie randomly on Saturday. And if you go back and watch the first Avengers movie, Loki is straight up chaotic evil in that movie. He is fully chaotic evil, and I don't even think he's like lawful evil. I think he's like chaotic evil. Like he doesn't have any real code that he's following. He's just trying to cause he's just trying to f things up just to like do it. He's just trying to like cause a mess. And you can see it. Well, first of all, you forget how brutal he is at killing people. He kills like a ton of people in that movie. And when he kills Coulson, it actually feels like really shocking if you just got done watching the Loki series and you've seen this kind of charming rapscallion Loki. When he jabs that scepter through the back of Coulson and just like cold-blooded kills him and just kind of gives this like wink and smile that he did it, it's truly shocking. That movie's actually aged better. Now I'm going off on a tangent, but that movie is actually way better now because of the subsequent stuff that he's done. No, he's truly chaotic evil in that movie, and there's a great moment that I think is underrated, and I did not notice it until you're a real Marvel nerd like me and you've seen this movie like 5 times. There's like a small moment at the toward the end of the movie where Thor and Loki are fighting in front of the Tesseract, and he's trying to do like one last ditch effort to convince him to come around good. And this was in the and you also forget how hard they were leaning into the Shakespearean like intonations and like how Thor was not funny or charming, and he's just like, brother, you must come around to the, it's all of that nonsense. And Loki's like, I can't, it's too late, I can't stop it. And he's like, the only thing left is, and he has this look of real pain and regret on his face. He says something like, the only thing left is the war. And he realizes that like all he wanted to do was start a war. That was all he wanted to do. He just wanted to start a war. And then when it was like actually starting to unfold, you can see him like freaking out and realizing like, oh crap, I did this, and now I have to live with it. Tremendous acting. He's chaotic evil. That's all. That's the end of the story. But by the end of the journey, he's chaotic good, in the sense that he's truly an agent for good, but he still breaks the rules and bends the rules to do it. And I think he's edging toward being lawful good, like somebody that actually is fighting for some kind of code and sense of justice. They've really evolved that character. It's fascinating.
It's interesting to see how the character has changed over time, especially as we've gotten to see more of him in the various adaptions. I love getting 2 completely different answers with different ideas. That's what we live for with this game. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss Eric Lang's trilogy of games in just a minute.
All right, and welcome back to the Dice Pirates, and we're going to go ahead and dive into our main topic for this week, which is Eric Lang's trilogy of games, Bloodrage, Rising Sun, and the newest release, Ankh. These have been incredibly popular games over the last 5 or 6 years or so of board gaming. These have been some of the most popular games in the modern board game renaissance, and they've earned their place really for a reason, having incredibly complex, thoughtful gameplay, beautiful components, lavish, possibly overindulgent miniatures. They really kind of in some ways are the preeminent example of what we mean when we talk about the modern board gaming scene. Smart, thinky, overproduced board games. And so we wanted to spend an episode just kind of breaking these down and then looking at this newest game and how it kind of rounds out the trilogy. Aaron, give us a quick kind of overview of these games and kind of what they're all about and kind of what they've meant to gaming.
So Eric Lang's Mythology series, his Mythology Trilogy, which you can unofficially incorporate Godfather into. There are a lot of people who kind of see it as the redheaded stepchild of the family. It's Eric Lang's vision of basically just a dudes on the map game where you've got your own army that you're controlling on the board. You've got these amazing creatures from mythology that you recruit, these gigantic, powerful monsters that you're vying to add to your team. And it's all in service of, taking charge of the board, smartly navigating your units around. With each iteration, I feel is received better than the last. Bloodrage is by a country mile the most popular of this series. The I know whenever I used to work with CMON, every once in a while they'd gather us around and they'd let us in on little tidbits of company news. Whenever CMON has, they book factory time basically year round at the factories that make board games. Bloodrage is the game that whenever they have a little bit of a gap in the schedule, it's always Bloodrage. As far as I know, that's still true. Like it is, from what I remember, out of all of their games, it is singularly the best-selling CMON game. Obviously, with Zombicide and Arcadia Quest, as a series, those have sold many more units, but just individually, Bloodrage is the most popular. Rising Sun introduced us to the negotiation aspects of how the dudes on the map would work, and having to work with other players at the table, even though only one of you can win, but you still need to work with everyone else to ensure that other people lose. And then Ankh brilliantly strips almost all of that away. It is a game of near perfect information. The only thing you ever don't know is the card that your opponent is about to play, but you do know what's in their hand. It is a much simpler title mechanically, to the point where when we sat down to play it, within 20 minutes we were up and running. We only ever had to check the rulebook for like timing stuff or edge case scenarios. This is, Blood Rage is a great game. I have a hard time teaching Blood Rage to people. I have issues with Blood Rage, but we'll get to that in a minute. Rising Sun is not a game I would break out with people who are not hardcore board gamers. Ankh, I feel like I could sit down at just about any table and we could be playing in 30 minutes.
That's really fascinating to hear because these games are not simple games for the most part. They're not. And so it's really interesting to hear that Ankh is maybe a little more streamlined, maybe a little more accessible, because Blood Rage and Rising Sun, like you said, are very much they're board gamers board games. Like they're thinky, they're complex, they're hard to teach, and they're not friendly to new players. Like you can lose and lose bad and have a pretty miserable time at Blood Rage. We've had some nights like that playing it where somebody just gets trounced and it just doesn't go well, and it kind of stinks. The other thing I want to say at the top, just kind of framing these games, and to full disclosure, I not only haven't played Ankh, Aaron's the only one out of the three of us who has, but I not only haven't played Ankh, but I've sort of intentionally insulated myself from it because, our fellow Dice Pirate and good friend Max, he was in early and heavy on the Kickstarter, so I knew it was coming, and I knew one day I was going to play this game, and I was just like, I wanted to be totally fresh. So I have intentionally, I don't even know how the game plays. When Aaron explains it earlier, I'll be learning it with you folks listening. But all of these games, of the two that I've played, Blood Rage and Rising Sun, and I imagine Ankh is the same, they twist your expectations of what a war game, what a dudes on a map game should be. When we say dudes on a map, we're really talking about games coming out of the Risk legacy. Games where you move big handfuls of troops across the map and take over territory and have big chunky fights, usually with dice or card driven or whatever. Conflict heavy, fighty games. In Blood Rage in particular, completely twist your expectations of how battle ought to work. This is a game where you can be goaded horribly into a fight and set up to win the battle, only to score your opponent a ton of points because they secretly really wanted to lose. And so this whole idea of like when and how you fight and who you fight becomes this tense choice. And I love that. It totally does away your expectations. Just going around and fighting is a good way to lose Blood Rage. And it's also true for Rising Sun, where you could totally be getting hoodwinked into a fight for other reasons, and negotiation and around the table tactics becomes much more important than like who's got the biggest monster. Although having a big monster is almost always helpful.
Yeah, these games did such a good job of really taking games that were always all about fighting, and most of these games are definitely all about fighting, but really giving you more options than just winning the battle. You could intentionally lose the battle. You could try to win, but even in losing, you may still be able to gain something. You can take something from the person who beats you. There's a lot of different tactics that you can take, and so it's not as straightforward, like Matt said, as it may seem from the outset. And I think it's going to be interesting as we talk through these games to sort of see the progression of that, even just from Bloodrage to Rising Sun. But so I think we should jump into Bloodrage because, of course, we'll keep comparing these as we move forward. But Bloodrage is, of course, the natural place to start because that is the first game in this trilogy, and like you guys said, it is the by far the most popular. A lot of people have played this game. It is very gorgeous. I mean, the map is beautiful, and the game revolves around sending your Norsemen into this onto this map and trying to area control places. And as you control different areas, you gain the option to pillage them. And if you pillage them, you get to raise some of the stats on your board. Each clan that an individual is playing has different stats that they will raise, whether it be the number of warriors they can have on the board, the amount of rage that they have, the actions they can take, or like how many points you get from winning battles. All of these things can be increased, and you can upgrade by getting new characters and new abilities and all sorts of things. And so you're working towards those as much as you're working towards winning, and each time you're able to control an area, it's going to increase one of those factors for you. And so there's a lot of give and take where you have to decide what's worth your while jumping in. This game also uses one of the things that Eric Lang likes to do is this sort of escalating stakes throughout a game, where in Bloodrage you play through 3 different turns, and each turn points get more, there's more things you can do on the board, you're going to have more actions that you can take, you're going to have more powerful monsters that come out, everything becomes bigger and better, so even if you fall behind early, you might have a chance to come in later. And also it makes the end of the game feel a lot more weighty, and that's something we do see in his later games as well, where there's a lot more emphasis put on the end of the game than on the beginning of the game. Whether you like that or dislike that, that's a philosophy that he keeps coming back to for sure. So what do you guys feel about Bloodrage personally? There's a lot to unpack in this game, not just within the mechanics, but the emotions that people feel, primarily rage, while they're playing this game. How do you guys feel about it?
So there's several things I love about Bloodrage. The first is that it totally, and I sort of already alluded to this, but it defies your expectations. If you see Bloodrage set up on the table and you walk by and you look at it, you think, oh, I know what this game is. You need to have the biggest army. You need to have the toughest monsters. You need to have the most stats. And then you roll in and steamroll over all your opponents and you win. And that's a good way to lose most games of Bloodrage. Bloodrage is a game... it's not possible to get through a game of Bloodrage without getting into a fight, but it's very possible to win Bloodrage and lose every fight that you're in. In fact, that's an incredibly viable strategy if you play the right cards that give you bonus points for dying. That twisty sort of mechanic of your incentive for getting into a fight might not be just purely to win is one of the things that makes the game so tense, because you don't really know what anybody's doing when they move into a space. Are they goading you into a fight that's really for different reasons? Or do they really want that space? Because they need an area, they're going for an area control to control it. So there's all of these choices and layers of subterfuge that make it's not a straight up just battle game. The card drafting, that's something we didn't mention. Bloodrage is a card drafting driven thing where before each round of play, everyone drafts a hand of cards that are going to dictate their movements, their abilities, and not necessarily their movements. I'm sorry, it's going to dictate the combat power you have, the bonuses and upgrades you're going to be able to use, and even the objectives that you're going to have, the secret objectives that you're going to be working for. Those are things that you're going to compile in a draft phase. It's one of the most intense draft phases of any game because every card is so good. Eric Lane's design in this was so smart. There's hardly a bad card in that game. Everything's a viable choice, and so you're sweating knowing that, like, if I don't take this card and I hand it to my neighbor, I could be setting them up to do something amazing, but you have to take something and pass the rest. And so it's just so tense. It's so cool. It's so thinky. This is my favorite of the games. And again, I've only played the 2, but I love this one the most, mostly because its core kind of loop of card drafting, play on the board, repeat. I get it. It clicks in my head a little better than Rising Sun, which has been a little harder for me to grok, as they say. But I love this game.
My biggest issues with the game are mostly just how punishing it can be overall. Like, I mean, it is easy to feel like you're doing well and then just just to get completely blindsided by something you weren't expecting, unless you like have a grasp of what all the various cards are and the strategies. You may get hit by something that you're not aware of even exists, or fall into a situation that you could easily avoid if you knew more about it. And also just, I mean, if you, especially with the card drafting and the way that it works, if you don't plan correctly and you don't get cards that are going to help you progress and increase your stats, you can go into the final rounds and really have basically nothing to do, because once you run out of actions, the actions are limited by the amount of rage that you have. You know, the stats on the board, not the rage that you feel inside your heart when you play this game. So as you run out of rage, some other people may have way more, and they may be stealing some from you, so you can run out of turns really quickly, and it can feel very bad sometimes. I like the game, but sometimes this game is definitely one of those that I think can oftentimes feel the worst to play.
Yeah, if to key off of what Matt started with, if there is one through line in this whole trilogy, it is that winning is not the only viable path to victory. Every single one of these games very heavily integrates this idea that, I mean, like you said, you can go into every battle and technically lose all of them and still get enough points to completely demolish everyone else at the table if you know what you're doing. Bloodrage is my least favorite of these three games, and that is in large part due to the fact that I hate / am terrible at drafting. Just having to keep track of, okay, so I started with these 5 cards, and it's come back to me, and these 2 cards are left, so what else was in it when it left my hand? What do I think everyone else is trying to build towards, and then trying to form a cohesive strategy out of the stuff? For whatever reason, the other games, because they don't have that, I can hold everything else in my head at once. But just drafting as a mechanic, if I never play a game that involves drafting again, I'll be perfectly happy.
It's the hidden information aspect of it is kind of what makes it a lot harder sometimes,
Yeah,
because
and I mean that's
you don't always know what cards.
You know, every one of these games has its own unique aspect, and the drafting, the hidden information is absolutely the thing about Bloodrage. You know, they've all got giant monsters. They've all got fights taking place in different areas in different orders. But with Bloodrage, you know, your opponents have, you know, you can have secret quests where you need to have the most force in an area at the end of a round. And just the way all of those things key together, I can't do all of that in my head at once. I acknowledge and I recognize that my opinion is wrong here.
Well, it's not necessarily. I mean, card drafting is one of those mechanics that is love it or hate it, because it is combining a couple of things that some people are just gonna get very it's just gonna trigger some people. One is like having to form a strategy on the fly from like evolving information. And not having there's an element of randomness in card drafting that shakes things up, and that makes people nervous. It's having to make choices with incomplete information, especially that first card you pick when you have really no idea what direction you're going to go this round. You know, your first hand that you might get on a particular round of Bloodrage might be all killer. You might have 5 amazing cards that are just like, any one of these could set me up. I don't know what to pick, because if I don't pick whichever one I don't pick, I know the person to my left is like gonna pick. And so then you start doing that thing of like, well, maybe I'll just pick the fire giant so this guy doesn't get it, but I don't really want that agony. Totally get why some people don't like it, but that's what I in particular love. When you finally get your head around it. But I do want to respond, and we can't talk all episode about Bloodrage, but Ian said something that I think is really key to this game. It's hard for the first few times you play it because you don't know the cards. And so you can get completely blindsided by a play that you didn't see coming, that you didn't even know somebody could do. Like they'll play like an Odin card that nullifies all the powers that were just cards that were just played, and you just feel like you just wasted a turn in a battle or something, and you didn't even know that was possible the first time you played the game. It rewards repeated plays. The third time you play Bloodrage, it's really good, and the 5th time you play it, you're like, this might be the best game ever. So it's one of those games, if you hunker down with a group of people that like it and just play it a lot, it really rewards learning its secrets.
You can so easily fall into these traps where at the end of the first round, you have to fulfill different objectives to upgrade your stats, and if you make a misstep, you may not get that, and then that snowballs into the second round where maybe you don't get the right cards you need, and then all of a sudden you get to the final rounds and you are not nearly as prepared. And I mean, that's how it happens. That's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Sometimes Matt just pulls an amazing play. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it happens, and he manages to take the win by storm, and it's great. But you got to be prepared.
There's only like 3 games on the planet where I could do this, and this is one of them.
But I do think, and this is where I think I would prefer playing Rising Sun far more often than I would prefer playing Bloodrage, because I think the game offers a lot more and reduces some of the uncertainty that is inherent within the game and makes you more able to sort of look at it and actually plan, which Bloodrage is very difficult to do.
I could totally see that, and there's a lot of things I like about Rising Sun. So I guess this is as good a time as any to transition to Rising Sun. So the second game of the trilogy, it came out a few years later. The action shifts from Vikings to a fictionalized mythical version of Japan, complete with samurai and ninjas and a whole lot of mythological creatures. And the style of gameplay shifts radically. As we alluded to, the card drafting is gone, and in its place is a totally different dynamic involving alliances and shifting alliances. But the game still retains that core feeling of totally changing the dynamic about how battles work. Because once again, it's not a clean. It's not as simple as just overwhelming your opponent and winning. This is a game where you can literally have your opponent, your characters commit seppuku, commit ritual suicide, and still score points even off of a losing encounter for you. So this is a very complex game about conflict and the resolution of conflict, and also alliances and diplomacy play a significant new factor in this game. Aaron, I guess you probably like this one a lot better than Bloodrage, I would imagine.
Yes. So if you're not familiar with Rising Sun, one of the core mechanics is over the course of the game, you'll play, again, 3 rounds. Eric's got a real fan of that. But at the beginning of each of the 3 rounds, which in the game are referred to as seasons, you have a tea ceremony where you discuss with the other players of the table if you would like to ally with them, which when you or they select their specific actions, that allows you to benefit from the decisions that you make, as well as you benefiting from theirs. It also means that when it comes time for a conflict in a region, if it's just you and them there, then there's no fight because you guys are on a team. When Rising Sun came out, there was a lot of internet hullabaloo about the tea ceremony, and in my own personal opinion, people were trying too hard to gamify this real-world negotiation that was happening around the table. There were a lot of questions about, well, if I promise my teammate that I'm going to do this, and then later I go back on it, does that cost me points? And stuff like that, where I think he was just trying to introduce this idea of, yes, it is you and, up to 5 other people, which don't ever play that game with 6 because that's the rest of your day. It's you sitting around the table with the other players, and even if I have made an ally with you, Matt, at the beginning of the first tea ceremony, I don't necessarily want to drill into Ian too hard, because at the beginning of the 3rd round, it may be in my best interest to ally with him, but if I've been targeting him the whole game, he's not going to have anything to do with me. So it introduced and kind of codified this idea of working with other players and making sure that while you're trying to win, you're not focusing too hard on taking out one player, because they may turn things around in a way that you desperately need their help.
Yeah, this game can turn on its head very quickly. I mean, very similar to Bloodrage, but I think you can see it coming more. And that's something that you did allude to earlier, is that Rising Sun, I think, is very much the heaviest of these three games. There's a
Absolutely.
lot to it. It is a big game. But I think, for me, this is one of the more satisfying games to play, because there really is no hidden information, and you do have the ability to build a strategy and sort of see things coming from a distance, as it were. You get the chance to purchase cards, but everyone can see what cards you have during the game. You are placing people out on the map, but you have to choose that action, and so everyone gets to take that action as you go. And one of the benefits you get from choosing that action for that round is that you get to go last, so you can maybe react to what other people are doing and things like that. But then once you get to the battles, as Matt mentioned, the currency that you used in the game is actually used to do various actions in combat. Within combat, you can either, you can commit seppuku and you can have your warriors kill themselves for points. You can take hostages. You can hire ronin, so you can bring in outside forces to bolster your strength in that combat. In post battle, you can have poets write about the battle that happened and gain points for all the people who died. But each of these, you have to put coins towards which one you want to happen. So if I put a couple coins towards taking a hostage, but somebody else puts more, they get to take that action. And so similarly to Bloodrage, you don't know what cards people are going to play, but instead of the cards being something that would be drastically different, like you may have no idea what's coming out, you know exactly how many Ronin and how much currency each person has available. So the question is not what do they have available. The question is, what is he willing to commit, and where is he willing to commit them? So it becomes more of a sort of almost a deduction game. You have to decide what his goal is instead of trying to figure out how to hedge your bets. So if he comes out with a surprise card, you're going to get messed up. And I like that aspect of it because it is almost more thoughtful in a way.
To key off of that, the bidding at the beginning of each conflict in Rising Sun is, to me, what everything else is. It's just stepping stones on the path to that moment. To get to the part of the game where it's you and it's me and it's Matt, and we're all in a fight together, the ballet of minds that happens there, of everyone just, hands over their faces, looking at each other, trying to read into the minds and souls of the players around the table. That is absolutely the best part of the game. If there was a way to get to that
The
faster
ballet
Yes.
of
without
minds.
so much preamble, it is absolutely one of the best experiences you can have at a game table. I will stamp that right here. I really love Ankh. Rising Sun might still be my favorite, at least so far.
Couple of thoughts on Rising Sun from me. One, hearing you guys talk about it, I really want to play it. It sounds a lot better. It sounds a lot better than in my mind. I'm trying to remember why it's been so long since we played Rising Sun, and I think it's the complexity. It's harder to just kind of gear up and play. I mean, Bloodrage isn't. Bloodrage isn't like playing a game of Parks or something. I mean, Bloodrage is a big old game, but it's not nearly as hard to like remember how to play it. But ramping up to play Rising Sun, I haven't played it in a while, is an exercise in relearning a lot of intricacies, and that's a notch against it in my mind. But it does have so many elegant systems. It is less, for a game that is still about conflict, is somehow less fighty and less conflict oriented than Bloodrage, and that makes it, I think, a little more palatable to some people.
It's a game. Rising Sun is just a lot more methodical
it's more
than
subtle.
Bloodrage, and I mean that's to its benefit and its detriment, depending on how you approach that. But I think it is, in comparing these games, I think it's very interesting to see the similarities between the two, and you see the way in which the escalating stakes of the game, everything builds up to these climactic moments, and in Rising Sun they may be planned, and Blood Rage they just happen organically, but you still see this progression where things become crazier as the game goes on. In addition, like we've been talking about the whole time, the unexpectedness of the game, things can happen, and a lot of it is in reshaping your expectations for how fights and how in this game like alliances are supposed to work. And of course I think we see the same thing moving into Ankh. Aaron, you're the only one who's had the chance to play Ankh so far. You've said that this game feels like the game that Eric Lang was trying to create the whole time. Like, it feels like a logical progression and conclusion to the trilogy of games so far. How does the game play, and why do you feel that way?
So I'm just going to give the 30,000-foot view here of the game, just the general concepts. If you would like to know in detail how the game works, there's a guy on YouTube goes by Board Down Under, and that's board as in board game. He has several really excellent views of playthroughs of the game, how to plays of the game, as well as just his thoughts personally on the game. That's what I watched before I played the first time, and like I said, we were off and running within 20 minutes. In Ankh, the only real thing that is going to set you apart throughout the entire game is at the beginning of the game you will choose a god, and each god is going to have some power that functions completely differently from the others. It's, none of them are anytime you get money, you get one extra money. In Ankh, your god is going to have some powerful, unique mechanic. And instead of choosing an action from your board and then spending the necessary action points to carry it out, as in Bloodrage, or selecting from the 4 options that are given to you, as in Rising Sun, there's an action board that is set next to the map, and everyone has access to the same 4 actions. You can do 1 or 2 of them on your turn. So the first thing you can do is move. You can summon. When you summon, you get to put 1 guy on the board. You can gain followers. Basically, they're the money in the game. You don't spend them as money, you sacrifice them because you're a god and they're your followers, and that's how that works. And you can unlock your Ankh powers. Each player on their god dashboard is going to have the exact same set of 12 different powers, and over the course of the game, you are able to unlock a maximum of 6. And as you unlock your god powers, that's also how you will recruit from the 3 monsters that are present in any game. This is a huge departure from Bloodrage and Rising Sun, in that in each game there will be 3 unique monsters, and there will be at most 1 less than the number of players for each monster. So if you're really falling behind, you may not get a monster in a game of Ankh. As a consequence, the monsters feel a lot more impactful. As you pick your actions for your turn, and everyone operates off of the same action board, you're going to move the indicator a little bit down the track. If you move your piece to the end, or if you move the tracker on that to the end of that track, then you trigger the next event. On the event track, there's basically 3 events that can ever happen over the course of the game. There's control. So if you trigger the control monument event, you can take 1 monument that is uncontrolled, that is next to one of your pieces, and gain control of it. There's 2 camel events. In Ankh, there are 3 big regions that each have hexes inside them. On a camel event, you take your little camels, and you basically get to carve up the map some. And then the final one is conflict events, the big fights. There are a possible number of 5 conflict events in a game of Ankh, because if one person gets to the top of the devotion track, which is the score track in Ankh, they immediately win the game. So you may not get to all 5 conflicts. The conflict event also introduces 2 things that I have very strong feelings about, and I'll go with the second first. After the 4th conflict event, the devotion track is broken up. Roughly the bottom 2/3 is red and the top third is green. After the 4th conflict event, any players whose devotion is within the red are immediately eliminated from the game.
Just buried the lead. You're talking about like there's player elimination in this thing?
Yes. Now, it is very, very close to the end of the game.
But still.
So I can kind of forgive it because it is so close to the end of the game. And at that point in the game, you weren't going to win anyway.
Sure, but that's controversial. I mean, that's not something we see in modern board game design much. Just full-on player elimination.
At the end of the third conflict event, and this is something that has been setting board game internet on fire, the players who have the least devotion, the last place and second to last place, are forced into an alignment. They merge. And this is something that, kind of has historical precedent where gods of Egypt, as they would kind of fall out of popularity, their followers would kind of get together and worship them as one combined god. And there are a lot of people online who think that this is a very bad design choice and who intend to play the game without it. And while I want to say that it's your board game, you paid money for it, it's in your house, you play the game however you want, I think you're absolutely wrong, and I think you just don't know how the game is supposed to work.
I don't know anything about how the game works, but I love that. So a forced alliance between two rivals. Well, it's a little echo of what you were talking about with Rising Sun, where it doesn't pay to just be a total piece of garbage to every player all the time, because you might have to be allied with them toward the end of Rising Sun. And the same thing is true here. It sounds like in this game, you might find yourself all of a sudden having to be in an alliance with your bitter rival, somebody that you just screwed over 2 rounds ago.
When you merge with another player, the player who is in last place, they remove all of their pieces from the board. The only thing that changes hands is that any monsters they controlled leave the board, but they're now under the control of the other player. The player who is in second to last place, their score marker drops down to where the other player in last place was. So depending on what's happening in the game, that can really, really set you back. In the very first game we played, I was in last place by a fair margin, and I joked to the other player who had just been forced to merge with me. I said, wow, I've never done so bad at a game that I made someone else lose before. It's bad enough when I lose, but the fact that I'm losing so bad that now you're going to lose too is really something. And we were actually able in that first game, as the Merged Gods, we were able to leapfrog and win the game. When you merge gods, one of the big thing that happens is you now each get one turn. You're both in control of one player's worth of pieces. And on your turn, you only get one action. But what that means is you basically have control over the rest of the events for the rest of the game. Because you are able to ensure, you control more of the time spent on the action board than anyone else.
Is this meant, you think, to be a kind of a catch-up mechanic? The two players who are behind are merged together, and that becomes a more strong rival for the lead player going into the final act of the game?
It definitely helps. In addition, when you merge, you now each have the power of both of your gods. So whatever your god's powers were, you now both have access to that same set of powers for both of you. So it can make both of those people way more powerful, but you also, you're kind of hamstrung by the fact that you've only got one player's worth of pieces on the board.
So I am curious, because we have been talking about the connection between a lot of these games, and one of the things that we have been talking about, especially between Bloodrage and Rising Sun, is sort of the way that your expectations are changed and the way that you reshape how you approach maybe combat and some of these events, and it looks like alliances in this way as well. How does this game approach that concept?
Where Rising Sun had a mechanic for alliances and had mechanical benefits and drawbacks for alliances, Ankh, there's nothing in the rulebook that says you ever have to work with somebody unless you get forcibly merged. But it does make you pay more attention to where everyone else is on the scoreboard. Because unless you're 20 points ahead of everyone else, someone could leapfrog you, and now you're in last or second to last. So it makes you take into consideration with every combat phase, every conflict event that happens, do I want to absolutely decimate Matt and make sure that he gets none points for this? Or do I want to do something else? Maybe worry more about these later fights so that Matt can get a couple points off of this because I'm not that much further ahead than anybody else.
That's actually really cool. The idea that it's a different sort of subversion than it may be in like Bloodrage or Rising Sun, where in those you might be worried about what the other person will do. In this game, you actually have to be worried about how they're scoring, because if you're in a bad position but they're in a worse position, you don't necessarily want to force them into an even worse position because that could negatively affect you. That's really interesting. So there's definitely a lot of fascinating strategy that comes into that. I guess like kind of like some of the final questions I have here are just so this feels sort of like the goal, sort of the end point to what these original games sort of wanted to be. What sort of makes you say that, and why do you feel like this game is so strong?
Part of it is just how streamlined and refined this game is mechanically. Blood Rage you can teach to people if they've played, like Catan or something. Rising Sun, you need to play with people. Honestly, you kind of need to play with people who've already played the game before. Ankh, again, I could take this to a convention and sit down with a table full of people who this is maybe their first like modern board game, and I could have us up and running in half an hour. Like it is mechanically, it's a very simple game. There are, of course, sometimes you're like, how's the timing of this work? Or how does this specific god with this specific monster and this specific situation all interact? But that's all modern board games. Like, if you're going to sit here, look me in the eye, and tell me that you played a game that takes 2.5 hours and never once had to consult a rule book, then you probably designed the game because otherwise there's no way you're never going to have to consult some weird little edge case or the exact specific wording of how something works.
If it were app driven, you wouldn't have to.
Oh, yeah, you got me there.
I'd love to just sort of get a feel from you how you feel this game stacks up against the others in terms of just sort of the satisfaction of playing it. Obviously, you said it feels like one of the easiest to teach. There are some very interesting choices here with the merging and player elimination and some of the approaches that he has here. How do you feel this game stands when you compare it to the other two?
Having only played it twice, I can't say that I like it more than Rising Sun. But if you were to ask me right now of the two which one I wanted to play, it's going to be Ankh without a second's hesitation. Part of it is I just want to play it more because I feel like there's a lot more to it that I haven't experienced yet. There's a lot more to it that I haven't felt. It's got the giant monsters of the trilogies, and obviously in this game there are a lot fewer of them, and as a result, they feel a lot more important. They feel important like how they felt the first couple times you played Blood Rage. You've got this working with other players, and again, it's not really a thing that needs to happen throughout the game, but as you play it more, you're going to understand how important it is to focus on how everyone else at the table is doing points wise.
Yeah.
Because you can't put too much of a gap between yourself and the person behind you.
It feels like to me hearing you describe it, and like I said, I've intentionally kind of sequestered myself from learning about this game because I just wanted to come into it with fresh eyes. So this is really the first overview of the game I've actually even heard. But hearing you describe it, it feels in some ways like the culmination of everything Eric Lane's been doing. And it feels like a very satisfying conclusion to a so-called trilogy. Because each one of these games has reinvented some aspect of a traditional conflict game. Fighting and alliance building and the overall way you think about strategy and how you win. And this game really brings it all together in a really neat package in a way that sounds fascinating. And some quality of life improvements like a little bit easier to pick up and play, shorter run time, a potential for the game to end early. I can see this game being the most played for some groups because it's just probably going to be easier to set up and get done in a single game evening. And there's something to be said for that.
If you guys had to choose one game right now that you were going to play of the trilogy, which would it be? Aaron, I think you said you were going to have to play Ankh. I definitely myself, I think I'd have to choose Rising Sun. Talking about this game again makes me really want to go back and play it. Matt, what would you pick right now if you had the chance to play one?
Gosh, that's hard. I haven't played Ankh yet, so I mean, I really want to play Ankh, but it's going to have to be pretty good to supplant Bloodrage in my mind. I would probably play Bloodrage almost. I would play Bloodrage right now.
I mean, it's a classic for a reason, and I have never seen you turn down Bloodrage ever.
No, as a philosophical concept and as a game.
Aaron, thanks once again for joining us. Always a pleasure, and glad to have somebody to break down Ankh for us. Matt, if people want to get in touch with us, where can they do that?
You can find us on the Instagram at Dice Pirates. Give us a follow, give us a holler, see what we're up to, what we're playing. Send us a message. We would love to hear from you.
There will be a new episode of the Captain's Log coming out next week, and stay tuned for the next main podcast episode. We're actually coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Dice Pirates podcast. We started this just around this time 1 year ago, and we've really loved to see the response and getting to hear from you guys, so definitely be looking forward for that. But until then, we'll be right here on the Dice Pirates.